Thank you for spending a little time here with this story. Before we begin, please remember to subscribe, like, comment, and share this video with someone who enjoys emotional science fiction. It truly helps the channel grow. In this story, a human named Caleb Mercer arrives to buy a broken repair station, but instead finds a village declared dead by law. What he chooses to buy is not power, not ownership, and not gratitude. It is a chain. Now, let us step into Vera Hollow, where one act of mercy may force an entire system to answer. The human who bought a dead village instead of a bride the village that was dead on paper on the border world of Naravas. A village could still have smoke rising from its chimneys and children breathing in its doorways, yet be declared dead by law. Vera Hollow had been dead for 9 days. That was what the gray stamp on the relief board said. Dead village. Failed recovery zone. Transfer pending. Mara Vey stood before that board in the dry courtyard of her village, reading the words for the 100th time while the morning wind dragged salt dust across her boots. She was the acting leader of Vera Hollow, though no one had voted for her in any proud ceremony. The old council had been buried after the resource war. Her mother had died in the second drought. Her sister had vanished in the mines. Mara had become leader because everyone older, steadier, and more prepared was gone. Behind her, the village waited in silence. A boy named Nemi held a cup under the pump spout and turned the handle. Nothing came out but 2 brown drops. His mother pulled him away before he could cry. Mara closed her hand around the ration tags in her pocket. They had enough clean water for 3 more days if no one got sick. They had enough grain for 5 days if the elders ate half portions. The medicine cooler had failed in the night, and the fever packs inside it were warming too fast. At sunset, Sable Crown Exchange would take the entire village to Grey Salt Hall for final valuation. The exchange did not call an auction. They called it recovery reassignment. That made it worse because it turned fear into paperwork. A woman named Lyra stepped close to Mara and spoke softly. Let them take me instead. I can work. I'm not carrying a child. Tell them I will sign. Mara did not look away from a board. They refused individual pledges. Then offer them you. The words landed between them like a stone. Mara turned. Lyra's face was thin, ashamed, and desperate. She was not cruel. She had 2 children and 1 cup of water left. Hunger made decent people say things they would hate themselves for later. I already offered, Mara said. Lyra stared at her. They said I was useful, Mara continued, keeping her voice steady. But the village is more valuable whole. No one spoke after that. Across the valley, a transport crawler rolled along the salt road towards South Pump Station. The man inside was not coming to buy a village. Caleb Mercer had come to Naravas to buy a broken repair station and start over. He was human, 41 years old, broad in the shoulders, tired around the eyes, and careful with money because he had never had enough to waste. For 12 years, he had worked in frontier recovery zones after wars that were always called finished by people who lived far away from the damage. He had repaired water filters in bomb towns, patched power cells in refugee camps, and slept beside machines because machines failed less often when someone listened to them. South Pump Station was supposed to be his way out of moving from one disaster to the next. Taryn Holt, the local broker, sat beside him in the crawler, tapping one claw against a cracked tablet. You should look at the northern station instead, Taryn said. Smaller, but clean. Clean means expensive, Caleb replied. Clean means no dead village tied to the water map. Caleb looked through the dusty window. That village is not dead. Taryn gave a short laugh without humor. You are human. You still think dead means bodies. What does it mean here? It means no recognized self-rule. No protected land claim. No right to refuse transfer. If a recovery board says a village cannot sustain itself, creditors can take control of the people, land, tools, and water rights. People are not tools. Not in your courts, maybe. Caleb looked at the pump. Tower. The bearing housing was wrong. The handle should have resisted, but it swung too loosely. The main line was not dry. It had been locked or bypassed. Who controls the pump? Caleb asked. Taryn sighed. Do not ask that. Who controls it? Sable Crown Exchange owns the water bond. A bond here is not just a debt. is the file that ties the whole village to the creditor. They supplied emergency tanks after the war. Now, they hold the pump rights until the debt clears. And the debt clears when? Taryn looked at him. For a dead village? Never. Caleb said nothing for a while. The crawler reached South Pump Station. Taryn gave him the tour quickly. The main bay was salvageable. 2 filter stacks could be rebuilt. There were enough old parts to make the place useful in 6 months. Caleb should have been pleased. Instead, he kept looking across the valley at the village that was still breathing. By evening, Graysall Hall was full. Mara Vey entered with the people of Vera Hollow. Director Voss Cairn stood at the front table. He was tall, silver-skinned, and dressed in dark formal robes with a narrow collar. His voice was warm enough to sound kind from a distance. Vera Hollow has failed 3 recovery reviews, he announced. The community cannot maintain independent water access, food stability, or labor balance. The exchange, therefore, opens reassignment of its bonded assets. A clerk began reading categories. Land parcel, pump rights, adult labor, future labor value, domestic partnership claims. Mara stepped forward. Remove the children. Voss Cairn looked at her with polished patience. Acting Leader Vey, the children are not being removed. They are being protected as future members of reassigned households. They're being priced. They are being accounted for. Mara's jaw tightened. Then take my bond alone. I will work. I will sign permanent service. Murmurs moved through the hall. Voss Cairn lowered his voice as if comforting her. You have courage, but your individual value does not cover the village obligation. My people are not an obligation. No, Voss said. They are an unresolved recovery asset. Caleb watched Mara's hand curl then, slowly open. She could not strike him. If she did, the exchange would mark the village violent and reduce every legal protection left. The bidding began. 2 mining agents bid on labor. A settlement broker bid on domestic claims. A land company bid on the pump rights. Caleb understood what was happening before anyone said it plainly. If the debt split into pieces, Vera Hollow would never exist again. The children would go one way, the land another, the water another, and the adults wherever their bodies were useful. He walked to the front. Taryn grabbed his sleeve. Do not. Caleb pulled free. What is the price for the whole bond? The hall quieted. Voss Cairn studied him. The whole bond is not recommended for independent buyers. That was not my question. Mara turned toward Caleb. Her eyes were dark amber, sharp with hatred already forming. Voss named a number. It was nearly everything Caleb had. More than the station purchase. More than the reserve for tools, fuel, and permits. If he paid it, South Pump Station would be gone as a dream. His ship lien would come due. His fresh start would disappear before it began. Caleb looked once at the children with creditor bands on their arms. I will buy the full bond, he said. The hall erupted. Mara stared at him, as if he had placed a hand on her throat. Voss Cairn smiled for the first time. The human buyer accepts whole village transfer. I accept transfer of the debt file. The distinction is decorative. Not to me. Voss leaned closer. Payment first. Caleb signed. The hall clerk stamped the contract, and the sound cracked through the room. To every alien watching, Caleb Mercer had just bought a village full of desperate women and children. He did not defend himself. Not yet. The owner who refused to own the next morning, Sable Crown Exchange delivered the village to Caleb Mercer in a ceremony designed to make ownership look civilized. A clerk stood in the square of Vera Hollow with a black case. Inside were the control bands, transfer seals, labor schedules, household reassignment rights, and a silver authority ring that would let Caleb command the village under recovery law. The villagers watched from behind Mara. No one thanked him. No one should have. The clerk opened the black case. As bonded holder, you may designate work groups, residence transfers, reproductive household claims, and disciplinary limits. Caleb looked at Mara. Do you understand what all of this does? Understand what men with papers do, she said. I am not asking you to trust me. I was not offering. The clerk held out the silver authority ring. Caleb took it, weighed it in his palm, then placed it on the ground between himself and Mara. The villagers shifted. Caleb picked up the control band case and removed the master clasp. If I destroy every document, Sable Crown can claim improper transfer and take the village back. So the debt file stays intact. The body authority does not. He set the master clasp on a flat stone and stepped back. Mara's eyes narrowed. Why step back? Because this was not around my wrist. He handed her a hammer from his tool belt. For a long moment, she did not move. Her people watched her. The clerk began to object, then stopped when Caleb looked at him. Mara took the hammer. She brought it down once. The master clasp split. Caleb gathered the remaining body authority documents and tore them in half one by one. He did not tear the debt ledger. He sealed it in his own case because the ledger was the proof of what had been done to them. Mara noticed. So you keep the chain, she said. I keep the evidence. That is a convenient word. It is the only word I have right now. By noon, he was under the pump tower with both sleeves rolled up. The machine was old, but not hopeless. The intake line had pressure. The upper shaft was corroded. The filter housing had been opened and badly resealed. Someone had wanted it to fail slowly, not all at once. Mara stood 10 feet away with a knife at her belt. You do not have to stand guard, Caleb said without looking up. I'm not guarding you. I know. Two young villagers watched from behind the well wall. One had narrow shoulders and silver-black hair tied tight. The other had pale green markings along both arms and a broken pair of work gloves. Caleb pointed a wrench at them. Do they work on machines? Mara, glance back. Sila nor repaired cooking cells before the war. Paviran fixes doors, heaters, anything that breaks. Then I need them. No, then the pump stays dependent on me. Mara hated that answer because it was not a threat. It was true. She called the two forward. Sila approached first, suspicious but hungry to see the open machine. Pavi came slower, keeping her eyes on Caleb's hands. Caleb laid every tool on a cloth. Nothing hidden, nothing locked. If I touch a part, you see why. If I use a word that makes no sense, stop me. Sila frowned. Why teach us? Because if I am the only one who can fix your water, then I become another chain. Mara looked away. When the pump finally coughed, every head in the square turned. A thin stream of water spat into the basin. It was brown at first, then clearer, then steady enough for Mara to order cups brought. No one drank until she did. She lifted the first cup, smelled it, and swallowed. Her eyes closed for just 1 second. The village breathed again. Then a message drone descended into the square. It projected Voskaren's face above the pump tower. Bondholder Caleb Mercer, Vos said pleasantly, you have 7 local days to demonstrate lawful productive use of the transferred asset. Failure to do so will void your purchase under anti-fraud recovery statutes. Vera Hollow will then be divided and reassigned. The water kept running behind him. To clarify, Vos continued, a village without management is not a stable asset. If you wish to preserve your purchase, you must register as guardian owner. The projection vanished. People began speaking at once. What does guardian owner mean? Sila asked. Mara answered before Caleb could. It means he becomes our master with a gentler title. Pavi looked at Caleb, afraid now in a different way. Can you do that? Yes, Caleb said. The square went silent. He wiped his hands on cloth. That is why I will not. An elder named Orena stepped forward, leaning on a cane. If you do not, they take us. If I do, the law keeps calling you property. We are tired of words, Orena said. Children cannot drink dignity. No, calebri plaiv. But if I take ownership to protect your water, then the next village will be told the same thing. Find a kind owner or die thirsty. Mara watched him closely. And your better answer? 7 days. Water first. Food next. Then the ledger. What is in the ledger? Caleb looked at the sealed case. The reason they did not want to sell the whole village to one person. The debt ledger that bled on the 3rd day, Caleb found the second lock. The pump was running, but not freely. It drew just enough water to keep the village alive and not enough to refill the storage tanks. Caleb traced the issue down the old access shaft beneath South Pump Station. Mara went with him, carrying a lamp and saying nothing. At the lowest junction, Caleb found a black control chip fused into the main valve. The mark on it belonged to Sable Crown Exchange. Mara lifted the lamp closer. Her face changed. What is that? A lock. The pump is ours. The machine might be. The water rights are not. She stared at the chip as if it were alive. No, that stream fed our grandmothers. Caleb read the tiny engraved line. Registered as collateral under emergency relief bond. Collateral means they used your water as security for the debt. Mara stepped forward with the butt of her knife raised. Caleb caught her wrist. For one sharp second, she looked ready to strike him. Let go, she said. If you break it, they will call it theft. It is theft already. I know. You know nothing. I know they wanted you to do exactly this. Her breathing was hard. The lamp shook in her hand. Caleb released her wrist slowly. If you break it in anger, they get a clean charge against the village. If we document it, they have to explain why emergency water became private property. Mara looked at the chip again. Tears did not fall, but something in her face cracked. They sold the water under our dead, she whispered. Caleb took out a recorder. Then we make them say that in public. The lock gave them less water than they needed, but enough to last. That night, Caleb opened the debt ledger in the waterhouse. Mara sat across from him. Sila and Pavi sat nearby, copying figures on a clean boards. Orena listened from the doorway. The room smelled of dust, metal, and boiled roots. At first, the ledger looked dull. Lines of numbers, dates, stamps, fees. Then the words began to cut. Emergency water shipment, listed as loan principal. Donated grain, converted to handling fee. Medical relief packs, billed at private rate. Burial sanitation charge. Population recovery assessment. Future labor value. Mara stopped Caleb with one hand. Go back. He did. She pointed at a name. That is my mother. Caleb read the line silently. She died 2 years ago, Mara said. Why is there interest after her death? Caleb did not answer too quickly. Because they rolled her assigned obligation into the village body. Say it plainly. They are charging the living for the dead. Pavi made a small sound and covered her mouth. Sila pushed her chair back, face pale. This one is Nemi. He is 8. Mara looked. Nemi's name appeared under future labor value. It meant the exchange had already counted a child as future labor before he was old enough to choose anything. The room went very quiet. Orena spoke from the doorway. They priced the children before their voices changed. So Caleb read. Near dawn, Mara stood abruptly and walked outside. Caleb followed after a moment. She stood near the pump basin, arms wrapped around herself, looking at the horizon. You should have told me, she said. At the hall. Before you signed. If I had announced what I was doing, Voss would have split the bond at once. Land to one buyer, water to another, children into household claims, adults into labor contracts. I cannot stop all of it unless I bought it whole. You let us think you were a monster. Yes. Do you know what that felt like? No, Caleb said. Not the way you felt it. That answer stopped her anger for a moment, because it did not try to steal her pain. He continued quieter. I knew what it would look like. I knew you would hate me. I decided I could live with that better than I could live with watching them divide you. Mara's eyes shone in the weak light. You decided for us. I did. That sounds like ownership. It was the part one had no right to feel clean about. What do you want from us? She asked. Nothing you do not choose. Everyone wants something. I want the ledger admitted at a hearing. I want the water lock challenged. I want Vera Hollow restored as a living village. And I want Sable Crown too busy answering questions to do this to the next place. And after, Caleb looked towards South Pump Station, the life he had meant to buy. After, you owe me nothing. Mara almost believed him. Almost. The attack came 2 nights later. It began without shouting. That was how Mara knew it was Sable Crown. Raiders screamed. Hungry thieves panicked. Professionals moved quietly. The first blast struck the storage shed, not the houses. The second hit the seed room. The third cracked the filter housing Caleb had rebuilt. Caleb was awake before the third blast faded. He ran in the square barefoot, coat half on, tool belt in one hand. Mara was already calling orders. Children to the stone cellar. Elders behind the kiln. Sila, take the west path. Pavi, water blankets now. Shadowed figures moved beyond the pump tower. They wore no insignia. They did not aim at villagers unless someone got too close. They aimed at survival. Caleb saw one kneel by the filter housing with a charge. He ran. The blast threw him into the basin wall. For a few seconds, there was no sound, only white pressure and the taste of blood. Then he heard Mara shouting his name. The filter housing was cracked, but not shattered. Caleb crawled to it, pressed his bleeding shoulder against the loose plate, and jammed the emergency brace into place. "Moo!" Mara shouted. "If this goes, you borrow water tomorrow," he grunted. The villagers did not wait for someone to save them. Mara drove the attackers away from the pump. Sela dragged tools from the repair shed. Pavi and Lyra formed a line with wet blankets and smothered the fire near the seed room. They fought with no army behind them, only memory, hunger, and the knowledge that one more lost machine could kill them slowly. Caleb saw it through blood and smoke. Vera Hollow was not dead. It had been holding its breath. By dawn, the attackers were gone. The seed room was damaged, but not lost. The pump still worked at half strength. Caleb's shoulder was torn, and his ribs burned when he breathed. Mara found him sitting against the pump base while Sela wrapped his wound. "You should have run," Mara said. He gave a short, pained laugh. "I have been told that before. You protected the machine. I protected tomorrow." She crouched in front of him. For once, there was no accusation in her face. "You keep saying we owe you nothing," she said. "Yes, but you keep paying." Caleb looked at the villagers moving through the morning haze, counting children, saving seeds, rebuilding what had been broken. "Then make sure it buys something that belongs to you," he said. "Not to me." The system asked him to become a master director. Voss Cairn arrived before noon in a white recovery convoy. Mara stood beside Caleb in the square. Caleb should have been lying down. Instead, he stood with his wounded arm bound tight beneath his coat. Voss looked at the damaged filter housing. Tragic. Frontier instability is exactly why unadministered villages fail. Mara took one step forward. Caleb caught the movement, not her arm. She stopped on her own. Voss smiled faintly. "You see, Mr. Mercer, compassion is admirable, but structure preserves life. Your refusal to register as guardian owner has created uncertainty. Uncertainty invites violence. Your men missed the houses," Caleb said. "Very disciplined violence. I would be careful with accusations. I am careful with evidence." For the first time, irritation touched Voss's eyes. One of his aides projected a document. Under recovery statute, failure to productively administer a transferred village bond permits creditor review. However, Sable Crown is willing to settle. Register as guardian owner for 10 local years. The village remains intact. Water access resumes at managed levels. Debt interest freezes. A murmur moved through Vera Hollow. Managed water. Frozen interest. Intact village. To starving people, even a cage sounded kind if it had a cup inside. Orena leaned on her cane. Would children be safe? Voss turned to her with perfect gentleness. Under a responsible guardian, yes. Several villagers looked at Caleb. Mara felt it like a blade. They were not betraying her. They were tired. They had buried too many people to worship pure principles. Voss knew that. He pressed the advantage. Mr. Mercer would hold authority, of course. Residence approval. Work allocation. Partnership protections. Disciplinary review. All humane. All regulated. Mara heard a young mother whisper. At least it would be him. That hurt most. Caleb heard it too. He looked at the document for a long time. Then he looked at the cracked pump, the children near the kiln, Sela with soot on her face, and Pavi holding a save seed jar like a sleeping infant. "No," he said. A few villagers gasped. Voss tilted his head. "No. No guardian ownership. Then I am required to initiate recovery seizure. Unless there is an active dispute hearing." Voss's mouth tightened. "You have no standing for a regional hearing. I do if I accept full liability for the contested bond." Mara turned sharply. "What does that mean?" Caleb kept his eyes on Voss. "If the hearing finds against me, the village debt transfers to me alone. I become the one they can detain, put to work, and use until the debt is paid." The square went silent in a way even thirst had never made it silent. Pavi whispered, "They can take him." Voss studied Caleb, reassessing him. Given the amount, That obligation could last the rest of your life. Then schedule the hearing. Mara stepped close to Caleb. Do not do this. If I take guardian ownership, they win. If you lose, they take you. That is still one person, he said quietly. Not a village. She stared at him. You do not get to make yourself disposable and call it respect. That struck him harder than the wound. For a moment, Caleb had no answer. Then he said, I am not trying to be disposable. I'm trying to keep the question clean. Either people can be collateral, or they cannot. If I become your kind owner, the court never has to answer that. Mara's anger trembled, but beneath it was fear. Voss watched them with cold interest. How touching. Very well. Graysall Hall. Tomorrow at first session. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing, Mr. Mercer. At the hearing, the record will show that you purchased Vera Hollow. Freely. Do not expect the law to save you from your own signature. Caleb said, I am counting on my signature. After the convoy left, the village argued until dusk. Mara did not join the arguments. She gathered the village in the square and spoke when the light turned red. Tomorrow, Caleb Mercer will stand in Graysall Hall, but he will not stand for us alone. If we let him carry every word, then we are still letting someone else own our story. People lowered their eyes. Mara lifted the old ledger. My name is on the first contract. I signed when our children were dying. I have carried shame for that. Voskaren will use it tomorrow. He will say I chose this. Lyra began to cry softly. Mara's voice shook once, then steadied. I will answer him. Sela will answer for the pump. Pavi will answer for the seed stores. Orena will answer for the dead whose names they kept billing. Any person who can speak will speak. Any person who cannot speak will be named by us. Caleb stood at the back, listening. This was the moment he had hoped for and feared. The village no longer looked at him as its only shield. They were becoming their own witnesses. Mara found him later by the pump. You will barely stand tomorrow, she said. I have done worse and worse clothes. Do not joke. Saw thee. She stood beside him. When you first bought the bond, I wanted to kill you. I know. I still hate that you made us feel that. You should, but now I understand why you did it. She looked at the water flowing thinly into the basin. Understanding is not the same as forgiveness. No, it may become forgiveness. Caleb did not look at her. He did not want to ask for something she had not offered. Mara continued. If they try to take you tomorrow, Vera Hollow will not let you vanish quietly. That could put the village at risk. We are already at risk. For the first time since he had arrived, Caleb smiled without bitterness. Mara saw it and looked away too quickly. The next morning, they walked to Graysall Hall together. Not as owner and property, not yet as lovers. As two people carrying the same chain from opposite ends. The chainmakers had to answer Graysall. Hall was fuller than it had been at the auction. Caleb entered with Mara and the people of Vera Hollow. This time, the villagers did not walk behind him. They walked beside him. Voskaren stood at the front with his legal team. He looked rested, immaculate, and faintly amused. Caleb looked pale from blood loss and lack of sleep. His coat had been cleaned, but not well enough to hide the torn shoulder. The presiding magistrate, Ashrel Moan, opened the session. The matter before this hall concerns disputed recovery bond ownership, alleged mismanagement of transferred assets, and a petition for emergency review. Voss rose first. His voice filled the hall like warm oil. He turned slightly toward the audience. Compassion without discipline is dangerous. Human sentiment is known across frontier space. It burns brightly, interferes quickly, and leaves others to manage the ashes. A few listeners murmured approval. Voss continued. If Mr. Mercer wishes to protect Vera Hollow, Sable Crown has offered a humane path. Guardian ownership, oversight, frozen interest, safety. He refuses because he prefers moral theater to practical rescue. Caleb felt the hall turn toward him. Magistrate Moan asked, Mr. Mercer, did you purchase the Vera Hollow bond? Yes. Did the transfer documents include management authority? Yes. Did you refuse to exercise that authority? Yes. Then explain why this hall should not return the bond to its prior creditor. Caleb placed the debt ledger on the table. Because the bond is built on fraud, coercion, and the conversion of relief aid into private debt. The hall stirred. Voss sighed. A dramatic claim. Caleb opened the ledger. His hands hurt. He made them steady. I'm not asking the hall to trust my feelings. I am asking it to read the entries. He projected the first marked page. Emergency water shipment. This was provided under the Post-War Relief Act. It should have been aid. Sable Crown listed it as a loan. The entry looked small on the wall, only a few lines of text. But those lines had turned thirst into debt. He moved to the next page. Medical packs donated by the Halda Mercy Fleet. Billed to Vera Hollow at private rate. The second entry turned charity into profit. He moved again. Burial sanitation charge applied to deceased residents, then rolled into living community debt with interest. The third entry made the dead keep owing money. A low sound moved through the back of the hall. Caleb showed the next entry. Children listed under future labor value before legal working age. Voss stood. Standard recovery, forecasting. Caleb looked at him. You priced children before they could read the contract. The hall fell quiet. Voss's expression hardened. Emotional phrasing does not change accounting. No, Caleb said, but accounting does not change children into collateral. Magistrate Moan leaned forward. Continue. Caleb showed the water lock next. He displayed the control chip, the old village markings in the shaft, the pressure readings, and the contract code. Sable Crown registered ancestral groundwater as collateral on emergency water loan. Then they restricted the flow. That forced the village to borrow more water from the same creditor. Voss objected. The village lacked technical capacity to manage its water safely. Sela nor stepped forward before Caleb could answer. Her voice shook, but it carried. That is false. The magistrate looked at her. State your name. Sela Nora Vera Hollow. I repaired cooking cells before the war. Caleb Mercer opened the pump system and taught me the lock points, pressure reads, and filter cycle. The pump was not beyond us. It was kept beyond us. The hall listened. Sela's words turned the pump from a failed machine into a controlled wound. Pavi Ren came next, holding a seed jar wrapped in cloth. I am Pavi Ren of Vera Hollow. Our seed stores were marked non-viable in the exchange file. That is false too. They were damaged after the hearing notice during the night attack. We saved enough because Mara Vey had us hide them. Voss smiled thinly. Unverified accusation. Mara stepped forward. The hall changed when she moved. At the auction, she had stood like someone trapped in a narrowing room. Now, she stood like a door opening from the inside. My name is Mara Vey, she said, acting leader of Vera Hollow. Voss turned toward her with gentle cruelty, and signer of the original relief bond. Mara looked at him. Yes. There it was. The word she had feared for years. Yes. Voss spread his hands. No one forced your mark. Mara's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. Caleb wanted to step in, but he did not. This was hers. Mara said, the day I signed, children in my village were dying of salt fever. Your convoy held the only clean water within 200 miles. You told me the papers were temporary relief forms. You told me a leader who refused water over words did not deserve to lead. Voss said, you were free to decline. Mara turned to the magistrate. If a person holds water in front of a dying child and says sign, that is not freedom. It is a blade without a handle. No one moved. She continued, voice growing stronger. I signed. I will carry that. But my signature under thirst did not give them our dead. It did not give them our children. It did not give them the water under our homes. It did not make my people property. An elder came forward next. Arena named 6 dead villagers whose debts had grown after burial. Each name made the ledger less clean. A young mother named Lyra named her daughter, listed as future labor. A wounded veteran spoke of donated grain billed as premium supply. One by one, Vera Hollow stopped being an asset class and became voices. Caleb stood silent. That silence did more than any speech he could have made. Voss saw the hall shifting and made his final move. Magistrate, he said sharply, even if irregularities occurred, immediate dissolution of ownership creates instability. Sable Crown renews its settlement offer. Recognize Mr. Mercer as lawful guardian owner for 10 years. Freeze the debt. Protect the village. Preserve order. The offer landed heavily. It sounded reasonable. It sounded merciful. It sounded like a door out. Magistrate Moan looked at Caleb. Mr. Mercer, would you accept temporary guardianship if it prevents reassignment? Mara turned toward him. The villagers did too. For a moment, Caleb saw the life that choice would create. Vera Hollow safe for now. The debt frozen. Water restored. Children protected. He could be careful. He could be kind. He could hold power gently. That was the trap. A gentle chain was still a chain. Caleb put one hand on the table to stay upright. No, he said. The hall stirred in disbelief. Magistrate Moan frowned. You understand refusal may place you under individual liability. I understand. You would reject the only settlement guaranteed to protect them today. Caleb looked at the people of Vera Hollow before he answered. They do not need a kind master. A kind master is still a master. If your law can only save a village by giving it an owner, then the law is what failed. Voss's face went cold. Caleb turned back to the magistrate. I bought the bond because victims could not open the file. I carried the debt because they were not allowed to challenge it. I signed my name because the chain had to be held by someone the law would recognize. But I will not polish that chain and call it rescue. The representatives from the other dead villages lifted their heads. Caleb's voice weakened, but he kept it clear. Vera Hollow is not dead. It has engineers. It has farmers. It has elders who remember the water paths. It has mothers who ration their own thirst. It has children who should never have been priced. If this hall wants order, start with that truth. Magistrate Moan sat back. The silence lasted so long that Caleb heard the blood in his ears. Then the magistrate began asking questions Sable Crown did not want asked. Who authorized relief aid to become debt? Who registered the groundwater as collateral? Who approved the pricing of children as future labor? Who kept charging interest to people after they were dead? Who prepared to divide the village before review? Voss answered the first two with polished phrases. By the third, his aides began searching documents. By the fourth, one stopped meeting his eyes. The hearing stretched for hours. When Magistrate Moan finally delivered the ruling, her voice was formal, but something beneath it had changed. The dead village designation of Vera Hollow is suspended pending full reversal review. Water access is restored to local control under emergency protection. All labor, domestic, and future value claims are void. The Sable Crown Exchange Recovery Bond is frozen and referred for fraud investigation. Other communities under similar bond structures may petition for ledger review. The hall did not cheer at first. The words were too large, too impossible. Then Sela began to cry. Pavi covered her face. Orina lowered herself to the floor and pressed both hands to the stone as if feeling whether the world was still there. Mara stood very still. Voskaren gathered his robes with shaking dignity. As he passed Caleb, he spoke low enough that only Caleb and Mara heard. You have no idea what you have disturbed, human. Caleb looked at him. I know exactly what I touched. Voss left Grey Salt Hall under the eyes of every dead village representative in the room. Caleb made it 3 steps outside before his knees failed. Mara caught him. She helped him sit on the stone steps. You refused safety, she said. I refused ownership. It almost cost you everything. He looked at her. It still cost a lot. Your station. Yes. Your ship. Probably. Your clean new life. He smiled faintly. That was never guaranteed. Mara sat beside him. For a while, they watched the villagers touch one another's wrists where the bands had been. Then she said, I cannot repay you. Good. She looked at him. He turned his head toward her. That was the point. For the first time, Mara laughed. It was small, rough, and almost broken, but it was real. At the village gate, Mara stopped him. The gate was simple, made of old pump rods and woven saltwood. For years, it had marked the entrance to a place the law called dead. Mara placed her hand on the gate. Caleb Mercer, she said, and the village quieted behind her. You did not buy this village. You bought the chain around it. You carried it when we could not. You turned it toward those who made it. Now the gate is ours again. Caleb swallowed. He could not find words that would not make the moment smaller. Mara opened the gate. If you enter, she said, you enter because we invite you. Not because we owe you. Not because you own anything here. Because we choose it. Caleb looked at the people waiting. Inside, Sila and Pavi stood by the pump. Lyra held her children. Arena leaned on her cane with wet eyes and a fierce mouth. He stepped through. Later, when the first full flow of water returned to the basin, the children ran their hands through it and screamed with joy. The sound carried beyond the village, across the salt flats, toward other settlements still marked dead on paper. In the weeks that followed, Sable Crown's ledgers were seized. Greysalt Hall received petitions from 12 villages, then 20, then more. Recovery officials who had once called Caleb Mercer reckless began using colder words in public and quieter words in private. Dangerous human interference. Unpredictable moral oscillation. A destabilizing precedent. But on Naravas, another phrase began to move from village to village. A human can carry a chain without keeping it. Mara heard it first from a traveler who came to see whether Vera Hollow was truly alive again. She did not correct him. She only looked across the square where Caleb sat with Sila and Pavi beside the pump, teaching them how to tune the filter by sound. He had no station. His ship was still tied in legal claims. His shoulder would ache in cold weather. He owned less than he had when he arrived. Yet the village did not see a ruined man. They saw someone who had been offered the power to become a master and had treated it like poison. That was what the galaxy had misunderstood. Caleb Mercer proved something dangerous to every chainmaker watching. A human might buy the cage. A human might step inside it. A human might let the world call him monster long enough to find the lock. And when the door opened, he might walk out with nothing in his hands, leaving the captives free behind him. So the village that had been called dead was not saved by ownership, pity, or power. It was saved because one human being looked at a chain and refused to call it law. Caleb Mercer did not walk away with a village that owed him everything. He walked away with proof that freedom means nothing if it must be handed down by a master. And Mara Vey did not kneel to the man who saved her people. She opened the gate for him as an equal. Maybe that is what made humanity different. Not that humans were strong enough to break every chain, but that sometimes they were willing to carry the weight of someone else's chain long enough for the whole galaxy to see who had forged it. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who enjoys emotional science fiction, and subscribe to the channel for more stories about humanity, courage, and the strange things that make us different. And as always, thank you for listening. May your day be peaceful, your heart a little lighter, and may you never forget that even in the darkest systems, one act of courage can still change what the future is allowed to become.